Hey guys, Mike here with StoneCoatCountertops.com. Thank you for getting our slab jig. This is an amazing tool and you're going to have a great time using it. We're going to show you how to assemble it right now. It's super simple if you follow these few easy steps. Let's get started. I'm going to show you what you're going to need for your tools first off. What we like to use is a 7/16 nut driver. We're going to use a 7/16 socket wrench, a Phillips handheld Phillips screwdriver, and you're going to need an Allan that fits our Allan side here. It's a 3/16 Allan, okay? And also, it's handy to have a file on our carriage bolts. You may need to file them a little bit so that they fit in the groove of your slab jig really smooth. Most of the time they work just great, but you might need a file, just a little burr here and there. That's why it's nice to have that on hand. Okay, in your kit you're going to get 8 of our wheels, our castors. You're going to get 2 brackets, you're going to get 2 rails, and you're going to get a hardware pack. We're going to show you how to do this right now. And the first thing we're going to do is start assembling our wheels. It's very simple. Here we go. Okay, so I have one of my brackets and my wheels are ready to go. I'm going to open my hardware packet and we'll get started assembling these right now. Here we go. Okay, so we have the appropriate number of screws and nuts. We have lock nuts here. I'm just going to open these portions of our hardware pack right now. So I'll get those open and we'll dump those out. Okay. So I'm not going to use all the nuts on this particular step, but we will use a lot of them. Okay, so I'm going to take my flathead Phillips screw that goes in from this back side and it's recessed for that screw, so it's a nice flush fit. As you can see, you'll just use that hardware and it's going to go right here. One nice thing about our jig is all of it's made in America and these are all really nice heavy duty parts, so you're going to love working with this. So we're going to start putting our castor on right there, and I'm just going to use a lock nut and I'm going to put that on all the wheels and then I'll tighten them all at once. So I'm going to put that screw in there and we'll just put that lock nut. So I'll put 4 screws and 4 nuts per caster and we'll do that on all 8 wheels. We'll see in a moment. Let's do this. Okay, so we've got all of our castors, they're loose in the bracket and we're going to tighten those up. To tighten is really simple. We're just going to use a handheld Phillips. We're going to come on one side doing that and our 7/16 nut driver is going to come right here and tighten these up. Alright, so I'm just going to come in here. I don't like to use an impact drill here because I don't want to snap my screws, but I'm just using a regular drill and that tightens them right up for me. There we go. And these castors are really nice. They're going to glide really good on your table. And that tightens them right up. Those lock nuts aren't going to vibrate loose. Alright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through here and tighten all of our castors. And we'll proceed with the next step. Okay, we've got all of our castors nice and snug on our brackets. Let's go ahead and attach these to our rails, and that's really simple as well. So we got a nice extrusion here, real heavy duty aluminum. It's very stout. There's not flex in the middle here. When you're pushing down really hard, that's key when you're doing a slab jig, is you don't want any flex in the belly or the middle of this rail, and we've nailed that with this extrusion. And another thing that we've got done here is we're going to take these carriage bolts, and these carriage bolts is key, is what slides in this groove here. We're going to show you how this works right now. So here's our carriage bolt, and our carriage bolt is what slides right in this groove right here. Now if that carriage bolt isn't sliding freely, that's where you'll need the file to come in here and just file this off a little bit if necessary. You might get a little bit of burr or something right there on that carriage bolt. So if you do, that's what the file will do, and then when you stick it in there, it's going to slide really good for you, just like that does. So we're going to get our carriage bolts lined up in here and we're going to attach our bracket. So let's get this side of the rail all dialed in. So we're going to get 4 carriage bolts and then we're going to line our bracket up. So when you line our bracket up, the wheels are going to face in. You're not going to put the bracket on like this. You're going to put it on just like this, okay? So I'm going to line that up in the grooves. I'll just move these carriage bolts a little bit, so I line that up, and then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is just add the nuts, but I'm not going to tighten this down yet. I'm going to get everything aligned in order to do that. So I'll just take our same nuts that came in our hardware pack, and I'm just going to loosely thread those on. Okay, let's do these here. And you're going to love how this thing assembles. Everything is machined very, very well. It's all machined right here in Grants Pass, Oregon. And we really, really love these brackets. They're very heavy duty and they take abuse, that's for sure. Okay, let's put our other bracket on the other end. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to apply our stops. And this is what's going to stop your router from continuing into the metal jig, of course. So we have these really nice stops that we've machined, and our Allen is going to fit right on the top so that it fits flush in that stop. So you can see you're going to take your Allen screw, your stop, you're going to put that in, and you're going to use that same lock nut. So I'm going to take my stop underneath this jig, we'll push it up, and we'll just take that nut, and again, we're going to loosely fit this. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other end. I like to lift this up a little bit just to get my hand under there. Take the lock nut and loosely thread that on. Now this is adjustable, so depending on what size router bit you're using, you won't come in here and hit your jig. Alright, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make a very simple template of your router that you're going to use in the router jig so that you get it set up perfect the first time. Let's go ahead and go to our wood shop and I'll show you how we do that right now. Here we go. Okay, in order to set up our router to our actual slab jig, it's just a few easy steps. I have my router here. It's a Porter cable. I'm going to take the base off the router, and this is what I'm going to gauge on my table saw, is I want to know the distance from point to point on my diameter of my circle on the router base. So what I'm going to do is just set this to my fence and my blade right now. Alright, so I'm going to stick my router base right here on my table saw, and I'm just going to bring my fence right to where it stops. So it stops right there, and I don't want this super, super tight. I just want it just a touch. I'm going to lock that blade in, and now you can see that will slide, but it's going to be snug in there. So that's the distance of my router. I could use my router base as my template, but it's round, and so a square base is going to come in more handy. So what I have here is I just have a scrap of 1/2 inch MDF. You can use anything to make this jig, but I'm going to just use scrap MDF. So I'm going to rip 2 squares. I'm going to rip a square this way, and then I'll make 2 squares out of it so that I have a template. Here we go. So now we're going to take these 2 templates that we made really easily, and we're going to finish setting up our jig. Here we go. Okay, we got our 2 templates now of my particular router, and what we're going to do is we're going to slide these in this slab jig right now. And then I could jam these tight, and that's going to be the distance that my router needs to be. Now here's a key. If you come look right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this template. I'm going to get it flush right here with this rail, but you see how this rail is sticking out. So I'm going to simply line these up. That's going to line your rails up really good right here so it's even. But when you look here at this, we're going to need a speed square to get our wheels perpendicular to our rails. So I'm just going to take my speed square, and you can see it's way off. So we're just going to rotate these. Now this first set of wheels I like to keep it more towards the end of these rails. I'm not going to jam it and split the difference. I want one end that's really tight to the end of my rails, because we are adjustable, but you'll see later why I like this set closer to the end. And it doesn't really matter, just as long as it's not, you know, I don't need these wheels way in here. I just keep them out here a few inches, because I'm going to start with a 4x8 sheet of plywood. This will make sense a little later. Right now, I'm going to center this jig, and it doesn't need to be perfect, but it's going to be close. And so I'm just going to look at the distance here and get this centered right here in my rails, and then I'm going to make sure it's square. Let's go ahead and take our socket. This is our 7/16 socket. We're going to come in here and tighten these up now. So there's one side. Now I'm going to come over here, square this up again. Okay, I'm nice and square. And let's do one on this side. All right. Okay, now that we have two of our nuts tightened, we're going to do the other two on this bracket. What's nice about those carriage bolts is they hold themselves tight in that groove. It makes install a breeze. It makes it really easy. All right, that's nice and tight. Let's do this one. Our final one on this bracket. Okay. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to take our slab jig to our actual dirty room where we create all our sawdust and we router our slabs and all these things. And we're going to show you how to set this up to whatever width table that you're using. We start with a 4x8 sheet, but sometimes we have jumbo slabs, and we can show you how to adjust for that. Let's go ahead and move into that room, and we're going to put this thing and finish it right in there. Here we go. So we have this on our 4x8 sheet, and I have that one side is tight that we've already tightened. Now I have this side over here that's loose, and so we're going to walk that in to our base here. So you can see I'm just going to walk this in and get it nice and tight to that plywood. Okay, and then I'm going to center my rail here. I'll center that, and I'm going to take our template and put it right on top, so you can see the distance. It's not quite tight, so when we make it tight, it's going to fit our router, and that's why it's really important to have a little template. So I'm going to get underneath, and I'm going to tighten one side. I'll tighten this side first, and we'll bring this in and tighten that. So I'm going to just take my 7/16 socket wrench, and we'll get underneath this and tighten the first side first. Okay, when you tighten this bracket, you want to make sure you pull this rail so it's tight on that end of the plywood, and you're going to push this in. You want both of these rails nice and tight on your plywood. That's going to create a snug fit where you don't get a bunch of kickback when you're using the jig. Very good. That's exactly what I want. Okay, let's do the second nut here. Okay, that side's tight. Now I'm going to get to the other side, and it's important for me to push this tight so that it stays that same distance for my router. All right, so I'm just tightening this other side. I got my template nice and snug in there. All right, got that tight. Let's do the final nut, and then we'll get our stop set. Okay guys, I got my router here, and we're just going to test fit it in our router jig. So I'm going to stick it in here, and because we made that template, you can see it slides really easy, but there's not a bunch of slop this way, and that's going to make it really nice when you're using this jig. Now you remember how I had you take that bracket here and leave it short and one end is long. So you can see if I had a much wider table, we can adjust this bracket out to accept jumbo slabs. But most of our slabs are under 48 inches wide. But if we did have a slab that was, say, another 6, 7, 8 inches wide, we can take our plywood, we could cut plywood to the width that we need our jig set, and now we have any size table we want according to what size slab we're going to cut. So we could then move this bracket out. But we're setting this up for a 4x8 sheet, which is most of our slabs. Now you don't have to be right on your same slab width, just as long as your slab doesn't connect and punch your actual wheels or anything like that. So since this is long here, I like to face that away from me. And I do that so that I got plenty of room when I'm working with my slab jig that I don't run into the excess. So I'll stick that away from me, and then when I use my jig, I could come right down the line here and just use that jig and keep moving down that slab, and the extra is away from me, and I just am working with this little protrusion right here. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my router bit. So I have a 3-inch surface planing router bit. We have a link to this on our website, on the Amazon links where we buy these, and I'm going to share that with you guys. So this is a really great bit. It does 3 inches at a time, which is a lot. You go through a slab really fast when you have a nice wide router bit. So when you're looking for router bits, you got to make sure you wouldn't want a 3-inch circular router bit, because it would get caught in your jig when you tried to punch it through. This one will fit right through the slot, and then you can set your router to depth, no problem. So I'm going to go ahead and install this bit in my router. So I'm going to just put it down. I'm going to use my provided wrenches with my router to tighten this up. When you're tightening this, you want to make sure you tighten it really good. You don't want a loose router bit when you're working with something, especially when it's this big of a router bit. You want it nice and tight. You want a very good fit. I'm going to stick this bit right through this groove. Actually, I like the cord facing away from me. Stick it right there. And now I'm going to set my stop. This is where I'm going to set the actual stop of the jig. Okay, so I'm going to need that Allan. It's a 3/16 Allan. All right, that's nice and tight. I'll double check that with my router, and that's not coming anywhere near my jig. Let's go ahead and do the other side. All right, and I know those stops aren't going anywhere because they're super strong. All right, so what we would be ready for now is we'd be ready to start planing a slab. Our jig is ready to go. It slides really easy, very little fatigue, and it doesn't get bound when you're coming down. I'll actually show you. This thing just rides so well. When you're coming down your table, it just rides really easy all the way down that table, and so it goes down your slab super smooth. I love working with it. It's a great tool, and like I said, there's no bow in the center. That's a big deal when you're using a jig like this. So what we would do is we'd set our slab up here, and we would measure with a tape measure from the slab to the bottom of our jig, and we would find the low point. Wherever the low point is on that slab, that's what we're going to set our router bit to. So let's say the low point is right here. We would just open this router bit, bring it on down. Okay, boom, it's hitting the slab right there. Lock it in, and now wherever we plane across that table, it's going to match that low point. So when we are finished, that entire table is going to be very, very flat. You can watch all of our videos that we have on slab jigs, and it teaches you how to set that up. Enjoy the slab jig. Be safe, wear your protective gear, make sure everything is set up nice and rigid before you start. When you're using tools with a big bit like this, it's very dangerous. When you start the router, make sure the router is not on top of your slab. You wouldn't want to put the slab down and start the router. It's going to bind and skip on that wood. You want to start it off the slab, start the router, and then come into it nice and slow. When we overlap our piece, we like to overlap by about 50%, maybe 30%. You just want to take out enough, and if you have to go a lot, if you're going to cut a lot of the jig or a lot of the slab out, make 2 passes across the whole thing. Just start a little bit less, router it and do it again, because it's actually pretty enjoyable. You put that hearing protection on, you put your mask on, and you go in your own little world and you're working with wood. What better situation is that? If you have any questions on how to assemble the jig, how to work with the tools, call us anytime for free project support. Be safe, have fun, and send us pictures. And remember, until next time, from Stone Coat Countertops, you got this. We'll see you soon.